The late-night television landscape had seen countless celebrity interviews, but nothing could have prepared the audience for what was about to unfold on this particular Tuesday evening. Canon O'Brien sat behind his familiar desk, his signature red hair perfectly styled, wearing a charcoal gray suit that complemented the warm studio lighting. The Late Night with Canon O'Brien logo glowed in brilliant gold and blue behind him, casting its familiar ambience over the 300-person studio audience. Zendaya Coleman entered the stage to thunderous applause, her presence immediately commanding the room. At 27, she had become one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, transitioning seamlessly from Disney Channel star to serious actress to global fashion icon. Tonight, she wore a stunning emerald green dress that seemed to shimmer under the studio lights, her curly hair styled in a way that framed her face perfectly. As she settled into the guest chair, her warm smile lit up the entire set. "Zendaya, welcome back to the show," Canon began with his trademark enthusiasm, leaning forward with genuine excitement. "You look absolutely incredible, as always. I have to say, every time I see you, you seem to be conquering another part of the entertainment world." "Thank you, Canon," Zendaya replied, her voice carrying that distinctive blend of confidence and humility that had endeared her to millions. "It's always a pleasure to be here. Your show feels like coming home." The audience erupted in appreciative applause, and Canon's smile broadened. "Well, let's talk about your latest project. You're starring in this new drama series that's getting incredible buzz. Tell us about playing such a complex character." Zendaya's eyes lit up as she began describing her role, the passion evident in every word. "It's probably the most challenging role I've ever taken on. The character is dealing with identity, family expectations, and finding her place in a world that constantly wants to put her in boxes." Canon nodded thoughtfully, but something in his expression shifted slightly. The seasoned host, known for his quick wit and sometimes unfiltered comments, was about to venture into territory that would change the entire trajectory of the interview. "That's fascinating," Canon said, leaning back in his chair. "And speaking of identity, I have to ask, because I think our audience is always curious about this, do you identify more as black or white? I mean, you're mixed race, right? So which side do you feel more connected to?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. The studio audience, which had been buzzing with energy just moments before, fell into an almost eerie silence. Zendaya's expression didn't change dramatically, but something subtle shifted in her posture. Those who knew her well would recognize the look, the same focused intensity she brought to her most demanding acting roles. "That's an interesting question, Canon," Zendaya said, her voice maintaining its warmth but gaining a new edge of precision. "Can I ask you something in return?" Canon, perhaps sensing he had stepped into deeper waters than intended, nodded slowly. "Of course." "When you wake up in the morning," Zendaya continued, "do you choose which part of your Irish heritage to be that day? Do you decide whether to be more Celtic or more Anglo-Saxon?" The question was delivered without hostility, but its impact was immediate. Canon's eyebrows raised slightly, and you could almost see the wheels turning in his mind. Well, I've never really thought about it that way." "Exactly," Zendaya said, and now the full force of her intelligence and experience was becoming apparent. "Because your identity isn't a switch you flip. It's not a choice between two separate things. It's the complete you." Behind the scenes, the production team was holding its collective breath. Producer Mike Richardson, watching from the control room, had worked in television for over 2 decades and knew when a moment was about to transcend typical late-night banter. "Keep the cameras rolling," he whispered to his crew. "Don't you dare cut away." In the studio audience, Maria Santos, a 34-year-old teacher from Queens, gripped her teenage daughter's hand a little tighter. Both women were biracial, and both had heard variations of Canon's question countless times throughout their lives. They watched Zendaya with a mixture of anticipation and hope. "But surely," Canon continued, clearly not intending to cause offense but digging deeper nonetheless, "there must be times when you feel more connected to one side of your heritage than the other. I mean, your father is black, your mother is white. Don't you sometimes feel pulled in different directions? Zendaya took a breath, and in that pause, everyone in the studio seemed to lean forward slightly. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that transformed the entertainment show into something more profound. "Canon, can I tell you about my childhood?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "I grew up in Oakland, California. My dad, Kazembe Ajamu Coleman, is African American with roots in Arkansas. My mom, Claire Stormer, is of German and Scottish descent. And you know what? I never once woke up confused about who I was." She shifted in her chair, turning slightly to address not just Canon, but the entire studio audience. "I was Zendaya who loved dancing at her dad's hip-hop studio. I was Zendaya who helped her mom with the costumes at the Children's Theater. I was Zendaya who learned about civil rights from one grandmother and European folk tales from the other. I was never half of anything. I was always whole." The studio had fallen completely silent now, the kind of silence that occurs when people recognize they're witnessing something important. Canon, for perhaps the first time in his hosting career, seemed genuinely at a loss for words. "You see," Zendaya continued, her voice growing, stronger, "when you ask me to choose between being black or white, you're asking me to cut myself in half. You're asking me to deny part of my family, part of my history, part of my DNA. Would you ask someone to choose between their heart and their lungs?" In the third row, 16-year-old Marcus Thompson, whose father was Korean and mother was Mexican, felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had never heard anyone articulate so perfectly the feeling he'd carried his entire life, the exhaustion of constantly having to explain or justify his existence to people who wanted simple categories for complex identities. Canon leaned forward, his television persona momentarily forgotten. "Zendaya, I think I'm understanding something I never understood before. I apologize if my question was—" "Canon," Zendaya interrupted gently, "you don't need to apologize for asking. But I want you to understand why that question is problematic. When you ask mixed-race people to choose, you're perpetuating the idea that racial purity is the default, that being mixed is somehow incomplete or confused." She paused, looking directly into the camera, speaking not just to Canon, but to the millions of viewers who would watch this moment. "I am black. I am also white. I am not half black or half white. I am fully both. My blackness doesn't diminish my whiteness, and my whiteness doesn't diminish my blackness. They coexist, they inform each other, they make me who I am." The cameras captured Canon's face as understanding dawned. This wasn't just about Zendaya anymore. This was about every mixed-race person who had ever been made to feel like they had to choose sides, like they were somehow incomplete. "But society doesn't always see it that way, does it?" Canon asked, his voice softer now, genuinely curious rather than performative. "No, it doesn't," Zendaya agreed. "I've been told I'm not black enough for some roles, and too black for others. I've had people touch my hair without permission because they were curious about the texture. I've been asked to speak for all black people and all white people and all mixed race people, as if I'm some sort of walking United Nations." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what it's like to constantly be seen as representative of entire racial groups instead of just being seen as yourself?" The audience was completely captivated now. This had evolved far beyond entertainment into education, into human connection. "I remember," Zendaya continued, "when I was maybe 8 years old, a kid at school asked me what I was. Not who I was, what I was. Like I was some exotic creature that needed classification. I went home and asked my parents, 'What am I?' And my dad sat me down and said, 'Baby, you're exactly what God intended you to be. You're beautiful, you're loved, and you don't need anyone's permission to exist.'" Canon's eyes were glistening now, the studio lights catching the moisture. That's beautiful, Zendaya. And powerful." "It is," she agreed. "But it took me years to really internalize that message, because the world is constantly sending mixed-race people the opposite message. We're told we don't belong anywhere, that we're confused, that we need to pick a side. We're fetishized and othered and asked to explain ourselves in ways that monoracial people never are. She turned back to Canon, her expression compassionate but firm. So when you ask me whether I identify more as black or white, you're asking me to participate in my own erasure. You're asking me to make myself smaller so that other people can feel more comfortable with their simplified understanding of race. The studio erupted in spontaneous applause, not the prompted clapping of a talk show audience, but the genuine appreciation of people who felt seen and heard. Canon joined the applause, his face showing a mixture of admiration and what looked like genuine learning taking place in real time. "Zendaya," Canon said as the applause died down, "I have to thank you. I think you just educated me and probably our entire audience about something I never fully understood. I grew up thinking of race in very binary terms, and I realize now how limiting and hurtful that perspective can be." "Thank you for being open to learning," Zendaya replied graciously. That's all any of us can ask for, that people approach these conversations with open hearts and minds. But Canon wasn't finished. Something had fundamentally shifted in him during this conversation, and the audience could sense it. "Can I ask you something else? And please stop me if I'm overstepping again." Zendaya nodded encouragingly. "What would you want other mixed-race people, especially young people watching this, to know?" Zendaya's smile was radiant as she answered. "I would want them to know that they are not obligated to choose. They are not obligated to make other people comfortable with their existence. They are perfect exactly as they are, with all the complexity and beauty that comes with being mixed." She looked directly into the camera again. "To all the mixed-race kids watching, you are not too much of one thing and not enough of another. You are exactly enough of everything that makes you who you are. Your existence is not a question that needs an answer. You are the answer." The studio audience rose to their feet in unison. The applause thunderous and sustained. Canon stood as well, his respect for his guest evident in every line of his body language. As the applause finally died down, and both host and guest returned to their seats, Canon shook his head in apparent amazement. "Zendaya, I have to say, this has been one of the most enlightening conversations I've ever had on this show. Thank you for your patience with my ignorance, and thank you for educating all of us." "Thank you for creating space for this conversation," Zendaya replied. "These dialogues are how we grow, how we build understanding, how we create a world where everyone feels valued for exactly who they are." The interview concluded with lighter topics, but the profound moment they had shared continued to resonate throughout the studio and, soon, throughout the world. The clip would be viewed millions of times, shared across social media platforms, and used in classrooms to teach about racial identity and the complexity of human experience. But in that studio, in that moment, what mattered most was simpler and more powerful. A young woman had refused to make herself smaller for anyone's comfort, and in doing so had made space for countless others to do the same. Canon O'Brien had asked a question thinking he understood the world. Zendaya had answered it and shown him how much bigger and more beautiful that world actually was.